What did Doug Armstrong think about the Blues' end of the season and their unfortunate Game 7 loss in the playoffs? Let's talk about it more here on Locked On Blues.
Hey, this is Brayden Chen. Subscribe to Locked On Blues.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to Locked On Blues. I am your host of Locked On Blues, Haley Taylor Simon, talking to you all things about our St. Louis Blues here in the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today on Locked On Blues, it is all about the Doug Armstrong mentality. What did Dougie A think of the end of the season? What was he impressed with? What didn't he like? And what needs improvement for next season? Also, some injuries and health updates, and a really interesting quote that Doug Armstrong said about the injuries and health of some players. And then finally, how will you remember this season? I know it's been a little bit over a week now. Hopefully your emotions kind of leveled a little bit. For me personally, I am still working through it, but as I do this podcast every single day, I feel like I have a much better mentality about the season as a whole. So we have a lot to get into, and I'm going to start off with the Doug Armstrong mentality and some of the takeaways that he had from the season. So obviously, Doug did address some of the things that did not go right in the playoffs. So I'm going to start off with the positives, and then we'll dive deeper into the negatives, since the negatives do entail a more detailed conversation. Positives, Doug talked about acquiring Cam Fowler from Anaheim and how Fowler proved to be one of the top players in his position, not just on the Blues, but throughout the league. And he praised Cam Fowler a lot. And I think that this was something that was really important for Fowler that he did. He came to the Blues with playing 993 games on the Anaheim Ducks. And on his 1,000th game, it was the Winter Classic, and he was able to score 2 goals. But overall, defensively, though, I know that was an offensive move that he made. He has been tremendous. He is able to block shots. He's great with his positioning. He's able to get back fast enough. And I think that Cam Fowler as a whole just really impressed everybody. I don't think anybody expected him to play as well as he did. I think with Anaheim, and I'm not trying to diss on Anaheim by any means, but they've been out of the playoffs for a little bit, right? And when a player does what they need to do during the regular season, you don't always see the player in their full kind of capability and role of what they can actually execute. So I think with Cam Fowler doing what he did, which is being an excellent defenseman, being on the first pair, it just goes to show that this was a really smart move that Doug made. Doug also said from, 30,000 feet, he was exaggerating, that he can't always see everything that goes on. However, he knows that having Coach Jim Montgomery is the best decision for this team. He went on by saying essentially that Drew Bannister, it's not that he did anything wrong, but he was new, he was still learning, and he didn't have the experience, which is so valid. He said Coach Montgomery, on the other hand, has all of this experience throughout the years, and the players know that. So they can't come up with those excuses anymore of us not having a good coach when they have one of the best coaches in the league. He went on to praise Jim Montgomery, and especially with the turnaround that this team had with the 12-game win streak, he gave Coach Montgomery a lot of credit for that. But overall, he does not want the idea of the Blues not having a good coach to ever be in a conversation again, now that they have Coach Montgomery. What I found interesting about this and what Doug had to say, it wasn't like, Coach Montgomery is one of the better coaches. No, he said hands down that he is the best coach in the NHL with the most experience. Now, again, I'm sure you can debate that one, but he does have a lot of confidence when it comes to Coach Montgomery and what he's able to do. Obviously, Mountie was here with us before in a different role, but I think that it just goes to show that you bring him in, this team that did not look like a playoff team was able to turn things around and end up in the playoffs. So again, he had nothing but praise for Coach Montgomery. He talked about some of the younger guys that are going to be assets. He talked about the offer sheets. with Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg. And he gave a lot of credit to those guys coming in. And this was, for me, an interesting thing. Again, I'm not reading these quotes directly. I listened to what he had to say. I took some notes down on some points that I wanted to bring up. But he said that, a lot of people didn't really count the Blues into being a playoff team due to the age. And again, a lot of the guys on the Blues, I do understand, are a little bit older, especially defensively. But he said when you do acquire some of these younger guys, it, drives up the speed and it drives up the physicality. So I think that having a Philip Broberg, a younger guy on defense, and of course having Dylan Holloway, who is phenomenal offensively, helped this team elevate to another level. But a lot of people just didn't really see that maybe. And that's what he was trying to say. He also said for a guy like a Jake Neighbors too, a younger player who's had some experience now, and he said that he was another weapon that was used for this team. Now, it is interesting, right? Because he didn't really talk about Nick Leddy or Justin Folk in the press conference at all. They talked a lot about some other players like Bushi, right? But he didn't mention them. And that was interesting because it was like a 34-minute long press conference that Doug had. And with a lot of the problems that we saw on the ice this season, I thought maybe he would have brought it up in some type of way, but he didn't, which kind of leads me to speculation of, are they going to actually be a part of this team going forward? But I think that what he did bring up, and especially surrounding Zach Bolduc, was quite interesting as well. I felt, in my own opinion, that he was hard on Zachary Bolduc. He said about, how, he was playing through some mistakes, and this is a luxury that he won't have in the future. And he also kind of went on to talking about how he didn't make the team out of training camp. And for me, I thought that was a little bit weird in a sense. Not weird, yes and no. But he doesn't expect him to make the same mistakes he made his rookie season, which is completely valid. But I felt like Zach Bolduc, nonetheless, he had an okay year. But again, that training camp comment, it's fair because that's what happened to him this season. I thought it was a little harsh, not harsh in a bad way where I feel like he was being overly critical. Just bringing that up made me kind of, I was like, oh, was that really necessary? But again, holding players responsible is a big deal. And I think that, with Zach Bolduc, he needs to really be able to compete for a roster spot, right? And next season, I'm sure that, Dvorsky, Snuggie, like they're all going to have those same type of expectations that Doug had on Bolduc in training camp. And I think it's really important for a Dvorsky to make the team out of training camp and not be in a situation like Bolduc. I think that a lot of the coaching staff on, the St. Louis Blues have a lot of expectations for Zach Bolduc, as do I. And I think that it's okay to have expectations. And if they're not being met, call them out because, again, these are the players' this job. So I think that you just have to kind of maybe inspire him, not inspire, but maybe motivate a little bit more. And I know that Doug also said that this isn't a shot at Bolduc and acknowledged, hey, like I'm not trying to come at him. But that was my one takeaway that was quite interesting. But I think it also goes to show how much they expect out of him, which is a good thing because it means that they see a lot of potential for him for the future. Finally, of course, the 5-on-6 was addressed. And Doug said it best. Unacceptable. It hurts. It's not good. It's been a pattern all season. If it happens again come this upcoming December, then he's going to have to, he said he's going to say some type of quote. Don't quote me on that. But he said it's going to then have to be drastically addressed. The Blues were the worst in the league when it came to 5-on-6, right? There's no denying that. You have to find ways to close out these games. At some point, You can say all the right things. Oh, well, we need to work on this. We're not good at this. You're going to have to make change. And I think that the change that needs to be made, it starts with maybe some of the guys that you have on defense, which is why evidently with him not mentioning Folk or Letty, I found that quite interesting. I'm not saying that they're to blame for all of it, right? But at the same time, it's not like their presence helped much either. So I'm going to leave it at that one because we all know how I feel about Justin Folk and it drives me insane. Listen, I never want to diss on players of my own team. However, at the end of the day, I don't want to experience having 17 regular season games and with a last minute goal. It's so frustrating. Also, one other thing really fast, I want to mention that Doug said that he liked that the team is disappointed because it shows, how much they care and it can be motivation for them and all that. There's going to be a part 2, by the way, to the Doug Armstrong mentality because he was on other podcasts and shows besides his end of the season presser. But that's basically my takeaways. My whole other segment is going to be, this is all about Doug Armstrong, but my other segment's going to be another portion of this about injuries and health. And then finally, how will you remember this season? Something that Doug answered and something that I'm going to answer and that I want you to answer. So this is the Doug Armstrong mentality. We're going to have a couple editions of this, which I kind of like in a way, actually. I'm kind of about it. Okay, Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It is the perfect grab and go snack for busy days, whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or I just need a quick protein boost. They're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. When it comes to injuries, the Doug Armstrong mentality is a mentality that I think all managers, coaches, players, fans need to have. Because this mentality showed me that the NHL, I hate saying this, might be a little soft at times with some things. The way that Doug described it, right? There's 2 players that were injured, Dylan Holloway and Tyler Tucker. Tucker didn't need any surgery, wasn't a surgical candidate. Holloway did have to have surgery. He did say, however, that Holloway will be good to go by training camp. He'll be 100%. That was Doug's words. I did have that written down. But he said for all the other players, he was asked about Robert Thomas, Colton Parayko. He said, if they're healthy enough to play the game, they are healthy. That's it. And I love that mentality. Doug went on to say that if you ask any playoff team if their players are 100% healthy, they're all going to say no. You play 82 games of hockey, hard hockey. You're not going to be 100% healthy, and that cannot be an excuse. And that is the mentality that people need to adapt and accept. Playoff hockey is one of the most physical things that I think I can watch as a fan. I think it's the most physical sport, in my opinion. I think with football, you have, 1 game a week. While it is physical, and I'm not denying that, I'm a big football fan, you have a lot of time to rest. Basketball, soft. Sorry, but it's soft. Baseball, not physical. A lot of games, not physical. The Cards are actually in my city today, and I was going to go, but then it got rained out, by the way. So shout out to Locked On Cardinals. But the point is that hockey is a physically demanding sport. You play 82 games a season. Then you go to the playoffs, and it is intense. I think when people come up with excuses for players, oh, well, he's not playing well because, he's a little banged up. That, to me, is unacceptable. If you're not able to play the game, and give it your all because you're banged up a little bit, then don't play. I hate that mentality. And I know the players don't really have that mentality because they still play. But when people ask that question, I always have to remind myself that this is maybe the media, this is other people, the fans asking it, and not the players making excuses. I think that as a fan, as a consumer, as somebody that loves to watch Blues hockey, playoff hockey, any type of hockey, we all know that these players are not 100%. We even said watching the playoffs in the first round series with Winnipeg and the Blues, we said Colton Parayko looks banged up, but did we have any sympathy for him? Absolutely not, because if he wasn't ready to play, then he shouldn't have played. But he was medically cleared and he was able to play. Same thing as Robert Thomas, medically cleared, able to play. Sure, the players can say, after the series comes to an end, hey, I was dealing with this injury. I had to deal with this and that. Valid. But I've never heard a player make an excuse saying, yeah, I'm a little banged up. I'm just not playing my game. Like, that's why. Like, they always play through their injuries. So why is it now that we're expecting the general manager, a coach even, to make excuses for players' performances in the playoffs when this is something that's been going on since hockey's began, right? We all know that these players are not 100% healthy. Now, does health matter when it's, the beginning of the season? Absolutely. You want all of your players to recuperate over the summer and be healthy, which is why I am excited about Dylan Holloway and what Doug had to say about how he's going to be 100% for training camp. I think that's excellent news. I think that with Tyler Tucker, too, it's good news that he didn't need surgery. You don't want these guys to have surgery because then their recovery sucks. But I think sometimes, and my frustration is just due to the fact that playoff hockey, any type of hockey, is the most physically demanding sport. And we know that these players get banged up. I mean, the Blues and the Jets series had the most hits out of any of the other series. And I know Winnipeg was dealing with injuries, but you didn't hear that as an excuse from the players. It was only from the fans. And again, I'm not trying to come at Winnipeg fans. I'm just saying a general statement that you never hear players using that as an excuse. So why start now? So when Doug said, if a player is healthy enough to play in a game, then he's healthy and there was only 2 injuries at the end of the season. That to me just gained so much more respect for Doug, even though I respect the heck out of him as it is. I think that that's the type of mindset, the mentality that others need to adapt. When you begin to make excuses, right, it takes away from what actually went wrong. What went wrong was a pattern that we've seen all season with the Blues with giving up last-minute goals. This is nothing new for the Blues. The Blues, they weren't able to just get the job done. And when you begin using the excuses of injuries and listen, if the Blues won that game, nobody was going to say, oh, well, was Robert Thomas okay? I'm sorry, but that's just the reality. The questions that are asked about the players and how they were in the playoffs was because they lost the series, if that makes any sense. Because when the Blues won all their home games in the playoffs this year, which is kind of a flex, no other team can say that they did that. Well, I think the Canes actually, whatever. But if the Blues ended up winning that series against Winnipeg, that question wouldn't have been asked. And let's face it for how it is, nobody questioned the health of any of these players when they were dominating the Jets in the 3 games that they won. So, again, call me old school. Oh my God, old-fashioned, Haley. I don't care. That is my mentality when it comes to hockey. Don't play if you're not feeling up to it. And if a player does play, let's not make excuses. Okay, let's talk about how you will remember this season. Doug said it best. 5 years from now, maybe a little bit longer, because he said this one's going to sting, which completely understand Dougie A. He's going to look back and he's going to see this team for what it was. A 96-point team who made the playoffs. He said that the team improved 5%. They had 92 points last year, did not make the playoffs, best worst team. And this year they won they gained 4 more points, right? Yeah, math. Doug said he's not good at math, and neither am I, so we can relate on that one. But he said they improved 5%, and they were able to make the playoffs. So he said that the way that they have been improving, it should lead them on a trajectory of making the playoffs next season with at least 100 points. I think Doug said, this season, they got what they needed to get done. He said they had expectations heading into the season, which was to get into the playoffs. They accomplished that. And that's all there is to it. And that's what I said on my episode yesterday of Locked On Blues, that I said at the beginning of the season that the Blues would be a wild card 2 team. They would get into the playoffs, and they would probably lose in the first round. Now, that all came true. But it's the way that the Blues got in, right? By setting a franchise-breaking record with the 12-game win streak. It's more than just the Blues making the playoffs. It's how they made the playoffs, which makes me impressed. So I think if you were to ask me in 5 years from now, what I'm going to look back on and remember, I'm going to remember that we won the Winter Classic, that we acquired Cam Fowler, who had an absolute dominant 1,000th NHL career game in the Winter Classic, scoring 2 goals. I'm going to remember all of the dramatics before the season began with the offer sheets with Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg. That was some of the craziest things I've seen, honestly. I'm going to remember Captain Braden Shen being honored for his 1,000th NHL career game. Binnington was honored this season, too. I believe that it was for his 500th NHL games, I want to say. I think that's what it was. I'm going to remember a lot. I mean, a Kyrou hat trick, a Bushi hat trick. Oh, man, this team, the coaching change. There's so much to look back on and to remember, seeing Snuggie, Dvorsky, man, even a Joel Hofer, how much he improved. He improved a lot this season. So I think when you ask me about the 2024 to 2025 St. Louis Blues, I'm going to say a team that persevered. A disappointing ending, nonetheless, but a team that persevered and was able to accomplish their main goal of making it to the playoffs. And I think that for you and for me, we're going to feel the sting of how the season came to an abrupt end. There's nothing like it. Game 7. We had a very successful Game 7 when we won the Stanley Cup a couple times in that series. Not series, like that playoff run. If only we had Pat Maroon still. But I think that when you go out in a Game 7, when you've had the lead for majority of the game, and then the other team gets a goal with 1.6 seconds left, tying the game, and then you go to double overtime when you end up losing the game, yeah, it's going to suck. And I think that it's okay to acknowledge that the ending sucked, because it did. You can't tell me that it didn't suck, actually. But I think being a fan and being able to take the season for what it was, you can objectively say that it still was a successful season for the Blues in the sense of the goals is that they wanted to accomplish, which was to make the playoffs. So again, we're going to have a lot more to discuss this week about some of the things that some other players said, more interviews that Doug Armstrong did. And of course, we still have some of that draft conversation and free agency. There is a lot that we have to discuss. And as much as I miss talking with the Blues in the playoffs, because I do, and I'd rather be doing that, total transparency, I'm also excited about the future of this team as well. So again, Doug Armstrong mentality, that was part 1 completed, and pretty soon we'll have a part 2. All right, I'll talk to you tomorrow, and like always, let's go Blues.